Hello, I'm Shigeki Yamaguchi, Executive Vice President of NTT DATA Corporation and also CEO of NTT DATA Institute of Management Consulting. We need to have customer value reinvention strategy which can provide new customer value by multiplying existing strengths and data, especially for existing companies to be successful with digital transformation. We have conducted lots of projects to support our clients to successfully transform their business by leveraging digital technologies. We are researching advanced digital transformation best practices over the world and trying to get insight and foresight from them. Because our mission is to support our client to become more successful through digital transformation by enhancing our knowledge and capabilities. In this situation, I came across an interesting and attractive book. The author wrote in this book, strategic thinking anchored on product and industries alone is inadequate to thrive in the new digital world. Drivers of competitive advantage unmistakably shifting from product to data. This book aims to provide fresh insight into how to unleash more value from data and revitalize traditional business models. This book title is The Future of Competitive Strategy, published in August 2022. Today, I'm so excited to have a discussion about the author of this book. The author is Professor Mohan Subramaniam, Professor of Strategy and Digital Transformation at IMD, and has written numerous articles on digital strategy, including the MIT Sloan Management Review and Harvard Business Review. I'm in charge of Consulting and Asset Business Innovation Headquarters and Technology and Consulting segment and Social Design since last July. I have been interested in how digital technologies change economy, management, and society. I published 3 books in Japan. Economy of Wisdom about how digital technologies will change the economy in 2019. Trust and Digital about how to make use of digital technologies in management in 2020. Traditional companies leveraging existing strengths, which is trust from customers. And in 2021, I published the 3rd book, Digital Transformation and Learning Organization, about how to develop organizations and talents to succeed in digital transformation. Dr. Mohan insists digital technologies such as sensors, 5G, and AI will expand the scope of data that companies can leverage, and the companies can build new ecosystem in order to deliver new values to customers. Digital ecosystems that harness the power of data will determine the competitive advantage of companies in the future. This book is very insightful and informative for business executives to direct their digital strategy to proceed. Thank you for your time, Dr. Mohan. I'm delighted to meet you again. I was very inspired through the discussion with you in Lausanne last September. Today, I would like to deep dive into advanced session regarding your book. Before our main topic, let me introduce our digital transformation framework as a comparison. Overall framework is shown in this slide. There are a lot of developing digital technologies. I have organized these technologies into 4 categories: convert, connect, algorithm, and cognize. When these technologies are combined, they can greatly change the society and the economy. Advances in digital technology make many influence on traditional large companies in terms of strategy, organizational capabilities, and organizational structure. Executives of these companies are required to understand and make use of the impact. Uniqueness of our framework is that we logically organize what strategy, what organizational capabilities, what organizational structures are required based on the economic impact by digital, such as ubiquitousness of touch point, personalization, uncertainty, reduction by data. What is the framework of the customer value reinvention strategy? The customer value reinvention strategy starts with the customer issues. I think solving true customer issue is the main purpose of digital transformation. In order to solve true customer issues, companies need to continuously increase their customer values by digitalizing their activities and leveraging the customer's data. I would start today's discussion with interactive data, which is made possible by the advances in digital technology shown on this slide. Advances in digital technology have greatly expanded the scope of gathering data and enhanced the ability to analyze data. For example, camera and sensor technology in combat technology, which digitalizes the real world, is well advanced. Until recently, IoT was an attractive keyword, but now, sensor technology related to the human body has been rapidly developing, and IoB, Internet of Body, is becoming next keyword. Algorithms are also constantly evolving, allowing them to analyze large amounts of data at high speed to discover new principles and make more accurate predictions. I believe such remarkable progress in technology makes it possible to create interactive data and extract various insights by analyzing interactive data. Dr. Mohan, you are mentioning in your book, using data is not per se a novel concept. Most firms possess data on their product, market, and operations. What is different today is that modern technologies allow data to be used in far more expansive ways, and the prevailing role of data is to support products now rather than data supporting products. Products support data because products become conduit for new kinds of product user interaction data empowered by modern digital technologies such as sensors and the IoT. Can you elaborate this interactive data and how it differs from the episodic data?
Thank you so much, Yamaguchi-san. That was what a beautiful exposition that you placed. I'm absolutely delighted to be here, and I'm very grateful for this warm introduction, and I'm very appreciative for the chance to elaborate on the kind of questions that you're asking. And I believe the first question that you asked about interactive data is a very significant one. So the way I look at interactive data, and you rightly said, data is not new. We have been having data for a very long time. So what is interactive data? And the best way to understand it first is to see an example of what traditional firms, who I call legacy firms. Legacy firms are those who have built their legacy before the arrival of the internet. And these are a majority of the firms in Japan and also around the world. So the best way to understand interactive data is to compare what these traditional legacy firms do with these new age firms like Facebook or Amazon and Google. So here I'm going to compare McDonald's, a very well-known legacy firm that has been around, and Facebook. Now, if you look at this picture of McDonald's, this is very famous all around the world. You'll see the famous golden arches. What you notice there is they're saying billions and billions served. So they have sold billions of burgers. Not surprising. What is interesting is that they stopped counting after they reached 100 billion burgers in 1994. Okay, because it did not matter. Legacy firms do not or could not track individual product sales, and it never mattered to them. It mattered how much have we sold, aggregate data around whatever we are selling, how we are producing, where is our inventory, all those kinds of things. And they come through episodic data, which is through discrete events. Every time a burger is sold, every time you order some supplies, every time you take track of inventory, that is episodic data. But if you compare it with Facebook, what do you see? They track every individual user, so much so that, for example, they know when a couple is likely to get married before the couple knows. So why is that? Because they are able to get what I call interactive data through continuous interactions of people with their platforms, which we do not do with products. We sell our products and we forget about it, like McDonald's. Interactive data is a continuous stream of data. Episodic data are discrete events of data. And because of that, there are a lot of differences across them. So one is generated by discrete events, such as the sale of a burger. The other one is every time I interact with Facebook, there's a continuous stream. Episodic data you generally use only after the fact. When you sell a burger at that time, in real time, you do not use that data. You keep it, you store it, you collect it, aggregate it, and then you can use the insight after the fact. How many burgers did I sell? What is my contribution margin? What's the inventory required? What is the projected sale? And so on and so forth. Interactive data can be used in both ways. It can be used in real time, like Facebook does. Because I'm interacting with Facebook and I'm talking to a friend about a car that I'm interested in real time, I get connected to an advertiser. But also, they collect data after the fact, which is again different because the data is coming from pinpointed sources. And that's why you get very precise insights about every user. And that is why they know when a couple is going to get married, even before the couple is aware, right? So these are very big differences between episodic and interactive data. And the good news is, like what you mentioned, that today with sensors and the Internet of Things, it is possible for legacy firms also to get interactive data, right? And this is something that we have to start thinking, because we are so used to episodic data that we are still to grasp the huge potential that this sensor data can give us. So it is not just about putting sensors in your products. It is about thinking, what kind of data can I get? How can I use it? And how can I use it differently? So I would describe three big differences, right, in terms of why interactive data is so powerful, and new insights, ability to share, and new experiences. And if I can go through them in brief, the insights are much deeper, again, like I said, because firstly, it is coming from pinpointed sources. It is coming in much bigger volumes. Now, again, it is interesting. Your company has done great work in the IT area and helping companies modernize their operations, many times you hear people say, oh, we have so much of data, we don't know what to do with it in the old world. In this new world, when you are getting pinpointed data sources, the complaint usually is that we do not have enough data because we want to do more things about understanding profiles and understanding what we can do with analytics, right? So if you think of the power of analytics and if you compare what is happening with episodic and interactive, episodic data was typically about descriptive analysis. What happened? Okay. Little bit about predictions in terms of what is the likely sale going on. But with interactive data, the predictions are far more precise. I can predict when a blade of a dishwasher is going to break. I can predict when a blade of a turbine is about to break. I can even, like Facebook does, predict when you're likely to get married, or I can predict the likelihood that you might fall sick. There are so many things that you can do. But what is more interesting is that you can also get into prescriptive analysis, right? Which is that you can then start saying what you can do. So the other big difference with interactive data is the ability to share. Why is this so critical? This is an extremely important difference, which the digital platforms, because their natural business involves sharing, they take it for granted. And when we see the platforms, we see it and we say, oh, of course, this is natural. But for our legacy businesses, we don't see it that way. For example, because real-time data can be used with interactive data, like I mentioned, we see it obviously in digital platforms, right? Because an Uber shares data between a driver and a rider in real time, and we take it for granted. Yes, of course. But episodic data, we never share with external parties because we don't use it in real time. Now, what happens when you start using interactive data with products is that there's a real-time component and then there is an after-the-fact component, which, like I said, is different because of pinpointed sources and profiles. But let me give an example, say, of Caterpillar, right? An excavator. So if the excavator is digging and it has just finished digging, in real time, it can share that information that I've just finished digging to a concrete pourer or to a fabricator or even to a competitor like Komatsu, because there is no competitive element to that. That value is transient because it is real time and it loses its value. That you finish digging now has no value if I share it after two days or 3 days, right? I mean, it doesn't have the same value. Now, what legacy firms have to understand is that if they use interactive data, there is a real-time component which can be shared externally. And if you do that, you can participate in new digital ecosystems, which I'm sure you're going to mention this, but digital ecosystems are networks of data generators and recipients. And we see it commonly with digital platforms like Facebook or Uber, because we know it's a network of drivers, riders, so on. But when it comes to legacy firms, we have not yet fully understood the scope of digital ecosystems, partly because we still use episodic data, which cannot be shared so very easily. So there is a lot of significance to interactive data, because by sharing data externally and also internally within your value chains, you can use data to generate new revenue streams. So products need not be the only sources of revenue, which is what today most legacy firms, 100% of their revenues come from their products. But if you think of interactive data, it can allow you to broaden these revenue streams if you think of how you can use this interactive data differently in digital ecosystems. And most importantly also is that it prevents legacy firms and their products from becoming commoditized, which is, typically we think of commoditization as somebody is coming with a cheaper product, lower quality, but it is affecting me because I have a superior product and I have a higher price. In the new world, if this superior product is also able to create new digital experiences through interactive data, it becomes more difficult for somebody to come and commoditize you. So it has a lot of competitive implications also. I'll just give a couple of examples here, and then we can move on from interactive data part. Here's an example of a mattress, which is through sensors in real time is able to track how well you are sleeping. Now, it can do multiple things with that real-time data. In real time, it can adjust the mattress shape so that it continuously makes sure that your sleep is at the highest quality. Now, like we mentioned, with algorithms, right, with predictive and prescriptive analysis that are possible, you can also start predicting certain things about the person's health, because sleep is a very important component of our health. So there are health conditions like sleep apnea, health conditions like restless leg syndrome. These are things that they can predict. And now it is not just a mattress company. It is becoming a much bigger wellness company. So you see now that data is driving their revenues because they can add subscription services to say, we can sell you a mattress, but if you pay so much per month, we can track your health. And now you notice that it is harder to commoditize this kind of a company because you're not just competing based on products or product quality. You're also tracking data, building very rich profiles about individual users that disincentivizes you from shifting from this mattress company to some other mattress company, because they will take much longer time to know about you and your data, right? So, and I will close with this part for this question with what you started, saying that this requires a different mindset. And you picked that quote very nicely from the book, that when it comes to episodic data, its primary purpose is to support products. How many mattresses am I selling? What is my margin? So on and so forth. Whereas with interactive data, the mattress is now a conduit or a way to get very valuable interactive data that can then drive revenue streams. But thank you for asking that question.
Thank you. I would like to ask you how interactive data will transform the value chain and how it will transform the network of complementary goods. Prior to that, let me explain how we think about partner collaboration in our customer value reinvention framework. Firstly, we understand customer journey starting from the current customer contact point, and then find customers' true issues by analyzing it and finally figure out outcome to resolve the issue. In this case, one of the possible solutions would be to provide outcome-based services beyond just selling goods and services. I believe collaboration with partner is crucial to realize this solution. In addition, we re-engineer the value chain, which is becoming more complex by personalization and real-time services. One of the solutions is dynamic optimization by utilizing data. Collaboration with production partner is also indispensable. This slide shows examples of customer reinvention strategies. One is an example of grocery store. Another is an example of life insurance company. On top of that, we believe the new collaboration with partners in the customer value reinvention strategy on the previous paper is practical from a cost perspective. The reason is that digital technology reduces transaction costs, lower partnering costs, makes it easier to collaborate with partners economically. Also, flexible business deals with multiple supply partners through market mechanism can be realized with much lower cost rather than fixed relationship with supply partners. We understood the ecosystem is effective in order to proceed the customer value reinvention strategy. But our scope might be limited to episodic data with Professor Mohan calls. We did not consider how to create a new ecosystem by using interactive data, such as generated by sensors. This is why I was so impressed by your theory that interactive data creates a new ecosystem. Can you elaborate this point?
Thank you, Yamaguchi-san. That is another very critical input, which is it's one thing to get interactive data. The other thing is about how to think of using it within a digital ecosystem that is specifically relevant to legacy firms. So again, we understand digital ecosystems when it comes to digital platforms, but 95% or 99% of companies in the world are not digital platforms. We produce and we sell. So my thought was, how do we think of digital ecosystems for legacy firms? And in that, interactive data plays a very, very important role. So let me start with how we can see a typical legacy firm value chain and what I call complementers. These are things that we have known for maybe over 100 years. So the value chain is very well known that to produce and sell, you need suppliers, partners, as what you mentioned, alliance partners, factories, which could be your own factories or outsourced factories. So you're absolutely right. There are a lot of partners involved, dealers, and your own units, all the way up to the time the product gets sold. And in this example, it is an automobile, for example, Ford. Now, after the product is sold, there are things called complements, which is also something that we have understood. So when you sell, you are supplying. Complements help increase demand. So in the extreme case, if there are no roads, nobody is going to buy a car. If there are no petrol stations or gas stations, nobody is going to buy a car, right? So the more roads, the more demand for cars, the more petrol stations, the more demand for cars, the more independent service providers who can fix your tire or do simple things on the road, more demand for your car. So you have the value chain and you have the complements. Now, let's see how this network, if you will, right, of a variety of your own value chain entities and partners and complements, what happens to this when you start thinking of interactive data? And before that, let's begin systematically. This is what I call the raw value chain. Okay, this is the left-hand side of the equation. This is what it looked like when Ford started in 1922. Okay, there were no computers, there was no data. It was a raw network. Then comes contributions from IT, which your company is one of the pioneers and one of the great companies in this, that it started creating a network of data generators and recipients in the value chain. And we all know the history. When it started, it was very siloed. Different systems would not talk to one another. And over a period of time, we improved. We have cloud services today, ERP systems. We have made a lot of progress in smoothing the flow of data in the value chain. I call them production ecosystems. These are networks of data generators and recipients in your value chain. And notice when IT started, and even today, the focus of traditional IT is to improve efficiencies. First, by simply automating manual processes. Today, by helping decision making, that on a dashboard you can know at any given time what is selling, what's your inventory, all those kinds of things. It helps decision making and it certainly improves operational efficiencies. But now, when you start thinking of interactive data and you add the power of sensors and IoT, then the magic is different. You can do many, many, many more things. First of all, you can significantly improve your operational efficiencies because now data is being shared in real time. So different machines can talk to one another. Artificial intelligence can shape how they talk to one another. And we have already seen concepts like lights out factories, where for weeks, the factories work without any lights because there's no human intervention required or minimal intervention required. The machines are taking over and doing the programmed tasks. So clearly there's much more of operation efficiencies. But now you can use your production ecosystems to also drive new data generating services. Outcome-based sales, as you mentioned, is a very important example of that, which is that if I get information from a jet engine in real time, in terms of its altitude, tailwinds, headwinds, speed, angle, and my algorithms in real time can tell the pilot that if you modify the flying of the plane in this way, then you will save fuel. It's an example of an outcome based, because you're saying that, look here, we have the power to reduce your fuel consumption, and we guarantee you that, provide you give us data and, of course, some revenues. So, and this concept can be used in so many ways, like you mentioned with insurance. That is, I can come to your home insurance business and say that I can guarantee you that your pipes will not freeze in winter, because we can track and make sure that the moment we see any possible risk of the pipes freezing, we will do a prescriptive thing of running hot water through those pipes so that it does not freeze. But of course, for that, you want to pay us. Now, all this is happening from your value chain. That is, data is coming, interactive data is coming from customers. Interactive data is coming from all your partners and value chain entities. And you are using that interactive data to drive new revenue generating services. That's production ecosystems. And that is something that the network exists internally for legacy firms. It's a matter of elevating the richness of the production ecosystems thoughtfully through the use of sensors, IoT, AI, and harnessing the power of interactive data. But if you come onto the other side, it becomes very interesting. These are complements which were traditionally never connected. Even 20 years back or 15 years back, we never thought that roads would be connected to cars. But today that is not true. We have seen this very commonly with any car, that it gives you traffic data. If you're running low on petrol, it can take you to a nearest gas station. And in some cars, it can also tell you you're running low on tire pressure. Here's the nearest service provider. I can take you there and they'll fix your tire pressure. So you're seeing these connections happening. Now, I call this network a consumption ecosystem. This is a network of complements that were never connected till about even 7-8 years back. But they are now becoming richer, bigger, and far more expansive. So this is one of the features of Ford today, that I can talk to Alexa and order coffee, and the nearest Starbucks would know me, my order, when I'm exactly going to arrive. I can come in there, pick up my coffee, don't have to stand in a line, and don't have to make any payment. Everything happens by magic in the background because of IoT and connectivity of assets. A parking lot can tell me that this spot is open, I'm reserving it for you, and guide the car to that parking lot. So there are lots of things happening around what I call consumption ecosystems. The difference, and we can talk more about the differences between production and consumption, but a primary difference is that this goes beyond your value chain and you're extending your value chain into a digital platform, which is that now the Ford car behaves very similar to an Uber by connecting Starbucks with the driver or by connecting a parking lot with the driver in real time. So you notice that this is possible only with interactive data. It is not possible with episodic data. You have to start thinking of using interactive data in very different ways. You also notice that you have to share data externally, which is why I mentioned that important to understand the difference between real-time and stored data. That is, how you share real-time data is very different from how you would share stored and archived profiles of people. So this is what I would call production and consumption ecosystems. And this is one of the key frameworks in my book, wherein I say that if you are a legacy firm and if you want to understand your digital ecosystem, you want to think of it as production and consumption ecosystems.
So I could learn that interactive data can evolve the value chain into production ecosystem and the complementary goods network into a consumption ecosystem. I could understand the evolution of value chain into production ecosystem could not only enhance operational efficiency, but also create data-driven services. Also, I understood that the evolution of the complementary goods network into a consumption ecosystem would allow us to offer new integrated customer services on the tethered digital platform. Perhaps many Japanese executives are not familiar with the concept of consumption ecosystem. For further understanding of your theory, we would move forward to the discussion about consumption ecosystem. Could you explain your thoughts on how to build consumption ecosystems?
That is a terrific question, Yamaguchi-san, right? How do we construct consumption ecosystems? So at a very basic level, the steps are simple. You want to think about what are your traditional complements, like we saw with the car, gas stations, roads, and so on. Now, you also want to think about what more complements can come to you because you have interactive data coming from your product. And now you will notice more and more objects are possible to be connected. And you want to start thinking about that from a holistic perspective. So in many ways, it is about a new way of thinking about innovation. Most legacy firms, when they think of innovation, is saying, how do I make a better product? But when you start thinking about interactive data, it becomes, how do I innovate with data-driven services? And of course, through consumption ecosystems, how do I innovate by connecting my product to all kinds of different third-party entities? And of course, a very critical aspect is an API strategy. As as NTT Data, you're very familiar with APIs because they are the glue that connect different software programs and protocols that allow different software programs to talk to one another. But for many legacy firms, the APIs that you use are all internal. So I may connect Salesforce with my payroll software to connect a salesperson's bonus through Salesforce, through payroll. Those things we understand. But for legacy firms to open up their APIs to the external world is not very common. So digital platforms do that commonly. That's why when you think of Nest that Google acquired, it's a thermostat, it's a traditional product, but its value today is because the APIs are open and all kinds of third-party entities can connect with Nest. An automobile can connect with your home thermostat, telling when you're going to arrive so that the temperature changes, and so on. So how do legacy firms start doing that? Has a lot to do with first understanding what the complementary network is, in some ways understanding the fundamentals of what your consumption ecosystem are to begin with, and then start thinking about how do I expand it through an API strategy. Opening up APIs is very helpful because many times you may not know upfront who else can complement you. And we understand that through apps, right? A cell phone app opens up its APIs and a whole bunch of app developers come in. You want to think in those kinds of terms of doing that. Now, here are some examples of innovative ways. You mentioned in your previous slides about grocery stores getting into recipes. This is an example of an appliance company trying to do that. So here again, you notice how different partners come in play, but also you see how objects that were not typically complements are now becoming complements. So we typically have a refrigerator at home. We also have a microwave at home. We also have an oven at home. We don't think of them as connected objects. We think of them as discrete appliances. But what has Whirlpool done is through this app, Yumly, which used to be an independent app, which now they have acquired, the app can scan your refrigerator, know what are the ingredients there. It has got thousands and thousands of recipes that are open sourced, which is anybody interested in sharing a recipe can give can give a suggestion to this app. Now you notice again, you see the open APIs here, right? It is opening up to the world. And so now these recipes are coming. So now the algorithm tells the user, based on these ingredients, these are some suggestions of what you can make today. If some ingredients are missing, Alexa comes in, Amazon comes in and says, okay, I can order it for you. And Alexa also works as a voice guidance to walk you through the cooking steps. The oven intelligently understands how much to preheat, what is the next step. It automatically shuts off. The microwave understands what to do with something that has gone in. So now this is a very different digital experience. Now, I've seen even a Swiss company, Thermomixer, which is a traditional kitchen mixer company that became an appliance company. They are also doing similar things. So this idea is catching on, right? So you notice this is a great example of a consumption ecosystem, which is you're identifying complements, not because of what we traditionally understood them as complements, but because of interactive data, that what can you now connect? Here's another example of logistics. So a locomotive company, and by the way, company like DP World, Dubai Ports, they are doing this. They are a typical logistics company. But whether it's a train or whether it is a freight ship, has so many complements to their activity. But typically when you focus only on your value chain, you think of it, okay, I have to load cargo. Somebody is going to load cargo. Somebody is going to unload cargo. My job is to take it from point A to point B. That's my value chain. Okay. But now with interactive data, you can connect the loaders. You can offer a platform to your customer saying that you can plan all this. Our platform will make sure that the loaders come and we systematically arrange the loading so that it is done most efficiently. And then when we reach the destination, there's a whole bunch of unloaders and also last mile delivery companies, which we can now bring into a platform. And again, you notice that real-time interactive data is essential for this, which is I need to know my expected time of arrival. I need to know a variety of things in terms of which good is going where. I have to share it in real time, and I have to behave like a platform. Another example of a consumption ecosystem in logistics. And this is a third example with, you may not think of it as obvious, but apparel. Okay. So this is a company called Lululemon, which is a very big brand in the United States and probably the world over. They make yoga apparel, and what they have done is that they have acquired this company called Mirror, which can see how you are exercising and then connect you with trainers. So now you see an apparel company has creatively thought of how do I get interactive data. It is not obvious for apparel companies to think of putting sensors in their apparel. It is harder. But this is what I meant by shaping the trajectory of innovation such that you see what is possible with data as opposed to just what is possible with products, and then expand the scope of.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining in details by using use cases. I could clearly understand how to construct consumption ecosystem. You are explaining that main provider connect with existing providers of complementary goods on a tethered digital platform in the consumption ecosystem and deliver new value to customers. Your idea is practical and insightful, but it seems that there are so many providers of complementary goods, and it is not so easy how to identify and prioritize providers of complementary goods. Before your explanation, let me share my thoughts using our framework. We aim to identify elements of activities which contribute to solve customer issues by analyzing the customer journey and then redesign new customer experiences based on them. The example of the slide shows that there is a customer journey of housewives: plan for dinner, visit to shop, purchase, pay, deliver, preserve, and cook. In this case, there are the providers of the complementary goods in payment, delivery services, refrigerator, and cooking utensils. I believe that we can enhance values to customers if we choose and add most appropriate providers of complementary goods on the ecosystem. This idea is to identify and prioritize complementary goods from the viewpoint of solving customer issues. Based on understanding consumption ecosystem, we would like to go to the next topic, digital ecosystem. We should firstly identify new interactive data to complement our current data. Secondly, we should connect them with APIs to provide new customer services. I believe this data-focused idea is practical and helpful to build consumption ecosystem. What do existing companies need to keep in mind to make the business successful by leveraging interactive data?
That is terrific. Yamaguchi-san, I really liked the example of the grocery store customer journey that you gave, which adds a very practical element in terms of thinking about a consumption ecosystem through a customer journey. And you notice now that there are many players who could enter this space. not just grocery stores, right? As we saw, even refrigerators or appliance makers, so on and so forth. So it becomes a very interesting issue for competitive strategy, which is our traditional thinking of product-based competitive strategy. We think of our competitors as those who offer similar products. But from the grocery store example that you gave, in this digital ecosystem space, anybody could be a competitor as long as they have similar data. So it's not just competition based on products, but it's based on data. And so there are a lot of implications now to competitive strategy, which our earlier frameworks, which were based on products and industry, could not catch because the world was different. So how do we think of competitive strategy in this new world? There are 2 points I would like to make. One is that when we are going into this new world, it is not that what we had in our old legacy world should be thrown away. They are very important. So your value chain and your products is the base by which you build a digital ecosystem. You're not saying that those capabilities and strengths are irrelevant. They're very relevant. If you have a strong value chain, you can have a very rich production ecosystem. If you have a strong product footprint, you can have a very rich consumption ecosystem. So the point, however, is that just the value chain and products may not be enough in the new world for competitive advantage. It is important, it is necessary, but not sufficient. So you want to build something around it. So that is the first thing I would say, that your production, consumption ecosystems with your products and sensor data in the middle, which is your interactive data, unlocks a whole set of options for you in terms of how you want to compete. And based on that, I think of legacy firms could benefit from looking at it at 4 different tiers or challenges, as I put it. Okay, they all need first shifting from episodic to interactive. And again, we repeat this, that purely with episodic data, there's a limitation to what you can do with digital ecosystems. You will basically remain in the product world. Interactive data is the way to unlock the new power of data and digital ecosystems. So if you think of it, there are these 4 tiers. The first tier is what I call basic operational efficiencies, but now they're coming through interactive data. So you talked about Cognize, right, which is the use of augmented reality, virtual reality. So if Ford, for example, in their plants can replace visual inspection of paint with augmented and virtual reality, and in real time make some corrections to quality, it improves their efficiencies in quality control. That is what I call the first tier. Now, I'm not saying it is easy, but it is easier than other stages, because from the second tier, the requirement is that you want to get interactive data from customers. Now, that's a very important pivot. What I say often is assets don't complain. You can put any number of sensors on your assets, they are fine. They'll give you the data. Customers are not like that. You have to think very differently in terms of how you could, and it is not just about putting a sensor in your product and putting it in the market. You have to convince customers in terms of why your sensor-equipped product is beneficial to them. What is that you're offering to them through data? And many companies don't recognize it, or it is too much of an effort for them to go through this. But I call this the second tier, wherein you're getting interactive data from customers, but still using it for operational efficiencies. For example, if I am Caterpillar, and this is a true example, which is through sensors, they have a product called motor grader, which levels dirt. Now, because they are able to track every single machine through sensors, they could make out that for in a majority of cases or in a large number of cases, the product was used to level lighter gravel, not heavy dirt. And so that allowed them to re-engineer the product. It improved their efficiencies for R&D, for product development, because they are getting accurate data in terms of how are your customers using your product. Many times we don't see it because we don't keep track of what the products are doing and what is the interface between the product and the customer. So that I call tier 2, which is harder than tier 1 because now you need data from customers. Okay. The third is how you use your production ecosystems for data-driven services, which is another shift. And all these first three tiers are coming from production ecosystem. The next phase, the last tier, is when you move into the consumption ecosystem. And that is what I call the fourth tier, which is the most difficult. Because as you rightly said, now you want to think about what's your consumption ecosystem and how do I connect and how do I become a platform and how do I open up APIs and all that. So what does strategy become in this new world? One way of thinking about it is to track where you are in this framework. Where are you today? Are you in the first tier? Can you go into the second tier? Not all companies can go into the second tier. If you don't have access to customer data, you cannot. For those companies, it's important to know, are we doing enough in the first tier? Then think of, can we go to this next tier or the third tier or the fourth tier? And then chart your digital transformation journey objectives, saying that maybe in 5 years, we want to be in tier 4, or maybe in 3 years, we want to. Then you're redirecting your organizational efforts in new directions in terms of new innovation trajectories. Like I mentioned, it is a different cultural requirement to innovate based on data when we have been used to innovating based on products. So this is a framework that would help think about competitive strategy in this way. And in this case, what I would say is if you are an incumbent, which is that you are, the big 800-pound gorilla in the industry with your products, there's an advantage you have because you have a big product footprint and you have a very strong value chain. You can create very rich digital ecosystems. However, there's a downside to that because you feel you're doing so well with your products. Why would you want to go into data? You don't see the urgency, you don't see the need. So I call it a double-edged sword, which is if you are an incumbent, you can have an advantage. But for that, you want to start planning now in terms of where do you want to take your company in this digital transformation journey, how and by when. And you want to bring an urgency into that. So that is what I would say.
Thank you. I understand there are 3 key points for existing companies to perform better business results by leveraging interactive data. Firstly, leverage the strengths of existing products and services to collect critical interactive data. Secondly, create an ecosystem to collect and utilize data to create a better customer experience. Thirdly, integrate both production and consumption ecosystems is indispensable to achieve this goal. Many companies aim to build a digital ecosystem by integrating the production and consumption ecosystem. You said the companies will not compete in of product and services alone, but compete in the ecosystem. How can companies gain a competitive advantage in such competition?
That is, again, a terrific question, which is connected to this concept that I have introduced in this book of what I call digital competitors. And we got a hint when we were talking about your grocery store example, when I mentioned in the traditional world, a grocery store will see other grocery stores as competitors. But in this new digital ecosystem, they could be very different players who could all it requires is, do you have access to the same data?
Yeah.
So if I am a light bulb company and I say, okay, I have a sensor that detects motion, and in a home when nobody is supposed to be there, I detect motion, I can connect to a security system, a consumption ecosystem, and deliver a service. So now I am a light bulb company, but I have grown into a security business because I have access to data, interactive data in the home.
Yeah.
But you notice now it's not just a light bulb that has that data. A whole bunch of other objects in the room could have the same data. iRobot, which is one of the vacuum, they were at one time thinking that maybe they should get into the security system. If they detect something, the robot can move and take pictures, and Google can do it, Amazon can do it. So you see how the scope of competition becomes much, much, much bigger. So who do you see as competitors are not just those who sell similar products, but those who have access to the same data. And if you think of competition in this way, then you see that the way in which you compete is different. The competitive dynamics become different. Okay, so here's where in the book, again, I have a chapter on this where I introduce two new concepts of what I call ecosystem parity and ecosystem barriers. Now, within ecosystem barriers, these barriers can be symmetric or they can be asymmetric, which is that if I'm having a digital competitor, we both have equal access to each other's ecosystem, or I have better access than you cannot come into my ecosystem. That's an asymmetric barrier. Based on these concepts, we can think of three broad scenarios. Okay, so scenario one, and I'll give through examples, is a digital toothbrush. Oral-B and Sonicare. Sonicare is Philips, Oral-B is Procter & Gamble. They both upgraded their electric toothbrushes into smart toothbrushes. Today, and Colgate has a similar product called Hum, and then there are a whole bunch of new competitors who are coming into this space. Today, the idea is to have an algorithm by which they can tell you how well you are brushing your teeth and give you some statistics and analysis. You see, it is the production ecosystem, which is all the intelligence is in the product or intelligence is within the value chain of the company. And this competition can become bigger and stronger based on how much of data you're getting from your customer base. And you can imagine that Oral-B and Sonicare are symmetric in terms of their reach to these customers. And they may have similar algorithms, and the competition would become, my algorithm can now predict a cavity. Can your algorithm do that? And I call this symmetry, right? And the symmetry in production ecosystems is there today. But each of these companies can also go into the consumption ecosystem, which they are not doing today, but they're thinking of doing it, which is, it's a natural thing. If I know that you are likely to have a cavity, can I connect you to a doctor or a dentist? Or if you are brushing well, can I connect you to an insurance company so that you get discounts in terms of your dental insurance? Now you notice that this competition is of parity, which is each competitor is equally likely to build strengths in both production and consumption ecosystem. There is nothing that stops them from being at parity. It's just like the product competition is being transferred into digital competition. So this is one scenario. The other scenario is that one player is in the production ecosystem and the other player is in the consumption ecosystem. So if you think of construction equipment, Caterpillar, is very strong in its production ecosystems. It has got a lot of connected products, millions and millions of them. And today they know accurately which machine is more likely to be replaced, so they can direct their sales efforts towards those customers, or which machine is likely to need service or predictive maintenance. So this is something that they're doing. They're very strong in their production ecosystems. Now, they could get into the consumption ecosystems, which is that if I have interactive data on what my machine is doing, I can connect it to other complements in the construction site, which they were thinking of doing, but they got into a joint venture with a company called Trimble, but then they decided against it. They said, we are strong in our production ecosystems and we don't need to go there. Hexagon is an example of a company that is started in the consumption ecosystem. Their business is essentially through data tracking locations of a variety of different equipment in the construction space and connecting them for project management services. So they know how the machines are being used. Caterpillar knows how to sell those machines, right? So that is the difference between them. But you notice now that the barriers are symmetric, which is for Caterpillar, it is very difficult to get into the consumption ecosystem. It's not very easy for them. And they tried and they said, we cannot do it. The same way, Hexagon cannot get into Caterpillar space and start making machines. It is very difficult for them. The engineering and the depth of experience that Caterpillar has is hard. They could think of getting commodity players with very little intelligence inside the machine, but all through software. But they are saying they don't want to do it because they are probably seeing the difference or the difficulty in getting there. This is an example of what I call symmetric ecosystem barriers. That is, I am in my production ecosystem. There are new competitors coming in the consumption ecosystem, but I can watch and see what they are doing. I have to be aware that it's possible for them to come and attack, but it's difficult. Third is when these barriers are asymmetric. And the best example of this is in banking in China, where we see traditional banks on one side, where they are classic production ecosystems, which is, I know how to sell a loan. I know how to give you money. But these digital platforms like Tencent and Financial, they know how you use money, right? Through their platforms, which is if I want a car, I go into search, they know you're looking for a car, then I chat with my friends, they know what kind of car you're looking for, they know your credit history because you're transacting with them. So they can come very easily to you and say, hey, do you want a loan? We can give you a loan. So this is an example of players in the consumption ecosystems coming into the production ecosystem. But here, the barriers are asymmetric. For a bank to get the kind of interactive data that Tencent has or Alibaba has is very difficult. Even if they put up their own app, we all know how difficult it is to get people to use your app. And also, these digital platforms have millions and millions of people who are giving them data. And it is very easy for them to get into this space. So you notice how digital ecosystems start bringing a different flavor in terms of how firms compete. It is not just about products. So banks are not just competing with other banks. In the Western world and in Japan, today there may be regulations which say that I will not allow an Amazon to get into banking. Rightfully so, maybe, because banking is a very integral part of a nation's economy. However, the concept is important. That if it has happened in banking in China, which other businesses could it happen? If you don't see your consumption ecosystem, you are not seeing a whole bunch of your potential competitors. And if you're not understanding the barriers that your ecosystem are creating, then you're not planning to defend yourself from those competitors. So that is what I would call the dynamics of competition being different. And here I would in my book, I have given some options for companies. And it again depends on the kind of ecosystems you are in. So if you're an oil and gas company, you're largely in your production ecosystems because you are not able to get interactive data from customers and create a consumption ecosystem. So your competition is within that space. And you want to make sure that you are keeping pace with other competitors. But if you are a Caterpillar, you want to defend your production ecosystem because there are competitors who are already in the consumption ecosystem space, like we saw with Hexagon. If you are looking at pioneers like Lululemon that we talked about, that there's no competition in the consumption ecosystem space today. There's nothing there, but we want to take the first step and we want to get there. And finally, evolvers, wherein the whole business is evolving into a consumption ecosystem space, especially 5G, and which is very relevant to NTT data, which is that you may be giving technology services to manufacturing plants where things are through cloud services. But now because of 5G, you can bring the intelligence down to the plant and create an ecosystem for them through. So now you could do it as NTT data, but a telecom company can also do it. Telecom companies, you were traditionally in the production ecosystem space, which is saying that I'm selling you data connectivity, whether it was 1G, 2G, 3G, or 4G. But now 5G, now the ability for the customers to use that connectivity to connect means there's a big consumption ecosystem opening up for them. And telecom companies are spending billions of dollars today with acquisitions. Verizon has got into logistics, fleet management. These people are getting into smart cities. These are all consumption ecosystems for telecom companies. So an entity itself, right? I mean, your parent company themselves may be doing or thinking about these in terms of evolving into the consumption ecosystem space. So here, the whole business or the industry is evolving into that space. So that is how these are some of my thoughts about competition in digital ecosystems.
Thank you. I learned a strategy depends on the position of one company and its competitor. Through your explanation today, I am getting aware to need further study as followings. When one company and its competitor has consumption ecosystem respectively, they have to compete on digital ecosystems. My first concern is what determines the competition among consumption ecosystem. For example, in Japan, mobile network operators are expanding their consumption ecosystem to support consumers' daily life, such as contents, payment, e-commerce services, and so on. Another case, life insurance companies and the health service companies, pharmaceutical companies, and GAFA are trying to establish their own consumption ecosystem to maintain people's well-being. My second concern is who will be the leader in consumption ecosystem. Let me share my thoughts about that. Inspired by your idea on slide, how do we construct consumption ecosystems? We have explored our hypothesis of the framework as following. What determines the competition winner among consumption ecosystems? Considering the competitive strategy of the ecosystem, we need to have a perspective of what value we are going to deliver to customers by whole the ecosystem. An ecosystem providing more customer value can gain a competitive advantage. In other words, having complementary providers which are crucial to the customer value in the ecosystem is a competitive factor. Who will win the leader position in the consumption ecosystems? The player with the greatest contribution value becomes the leader. In other words, the player who provides essential services and has essential data to deliver customer value becomes a leader. Technology advances change the value of contribution and the cost structure. The player who achieves the greatest contribution value becomes a new leader. In value architecture of consumption ecosystem shown on these slides, I didn't mention the dependency factor and cost factor in order to share the essence with you. I would like to take the following key points into consideration to enhance our framework. First key point is the dependency of each complementary goods might affect the structure of consumption ecosystems. Second key point is the cost incurred when complementary join the ecosystem might affect the structure of consumption ecosystems. So, thank you for today's dialogue session. I could learn more detailed level of your book and have a clearer image of your theory. Finally, can you send a message to the audience and advices to business executives?
Thank you, Yamaguchi-san.
Thank
I
you.
really don't have the words to express how grateful I am for such graciousness and the humility with which you have conducted yourself. And I'm very grateful for the entire team of NTT DATA that has, that we have interacted over the last few months. Really appreciate it. I also greatly appreciate the thoughts that you have put into these frameworks and brought years of your experience and thought processes in terms of complementing the ideas that were there in the book. And I greatly enjoyed this dialogue. So in closing, I would like to talk about one last concept. And that concept is what I call digital myopia. We all know myopia. Yamaguchi-san, you're wearing glasses. I'm also wearing glasses. We are both myopic. We can't see without our glasses properly. So what is digital myopia? Digital myopia is the inability of many legacy firms to see the value of data, to see digital ecosystems with the same clarity that they see their products and their industries. So they understand value chains, but they don't necessarily appreciate production ecosystems. They understand complements, but they don't necessarily appreciate consumption ecosystems. And of course, they understand episodic data, but they don't necessarily appreciate the power of interactive data. So this is what I would say, that one thing to do is to avoid this kind of digital myopia. And the frameworks in the book, kind of an humble effort to put forward some frameworks and ideas that hopefully will help legacy firms. So my focus has always been on legacy firms, because I've thought that, we all think of, when we think of digital, we always think about the Facebooks and Amazons of the world. And when we think of digital for legacy firms, we always think about efficiency. But there's much more than that. And what I would recommend is to avoid digital myopia, right? And that is what my book tries to do. And again, thank you so much for inviting me over, and thank you for your graciousness and hospitality. Appreciate it.
Thank you.